On a bright winter morning, Silverwake Lake looked too peaceful to be hiding anything. Then, an old veteran saw two men push a steel cage from a bridge into the freezing water. Inside was Bracken, an aging German shepherd too weak to fight and too tired to believe anyone would return. Merrick saved the dog, but the rescue led him to an elderly woman trapped inside a life controlled by someone else. To protect them both, he would have to learn that courage is not always breaking down a door. Sometimes it means waiting, listening, and giving another soul the freedom to choose. Stay with this story, then tell us where you are watching from and what freedom means to you. The morning after the heavy snow, Silverwake Lake looked almost innocent. Sunlight had just cleared the eastern pines when Merrick stepped out of his cabin and pulled the door shut behind him. The snow beneath his boots gave a dry, clean crunch, the kind of sound that belonged to bright winter days rather than dangerous ones. Above the lake, the sky was pale blue, and the broken sheets of ice near the shore reflected it so perfectly that water and heaven seemed stitched together. At 76, Merrick no longer trusted appearances. A clear sky could hide black ice. A silent engine could still hold pressure. A calm man could be one breath away from breaking. He adjusted the faded olive-green military jacket around his shoulders. The thick canvas had gone soft at the elbows and pale along the seams. A small U.S. veteran patch sat above the left breast pocket, while an American flag, weathered almost gray at the edges, remained sewn onto the right sleeve. The coat was not ceremonial. It smelled faintly of wood smoke, lake water, and machine oil. Merrick wore it because it had survived nearly as much as he had. He carried a pair of bolt cutters, a tow line, a mesh collection sack, and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead and probably offend them. His silver-white hair was short but naturally untidy, stirred by the wind as he crossed the narrow path to the dock. Deep lines marked his forehead and ran beside his eyes and cheeks. His skin held the light brown weathering of a man who had spent more years beneath open skies than under roofs. Near the end of the dock rested his old aluminum boat. Merrick untied it, stepped aboard carefully, and lowered himself onto the rear bench. His left knee complained immediately. "Your objection is noted," he told it. The knee remained unconvinced. For nearly 7 years, Merrick had cleaned the shoreline around Cedar Inlet. He removed abandoned fishing line before birds tangled in it, gathered plastic bottles, dragged broken branches away from the small public landing, and repaired the floating cable that caught debris before it drifted into the wider lake. No one had hired him. No one had asked him to continue. When people in Bellwether Pass thanked him, he usually said he worked for the fish. The fish, he added, had terrible bookkeeping habits and had not paid him once. The truth was less amusing. The work gave shape to his mornings. It placed one useful task in front of another. After his wife died, usefulness had become the narrow bridge between solitude and disappearance. The boat's small motor carried him across the inlet at a slow, steady pace. Snow lay along the shoreline in smooth white banks. Dark fir trees rose behind them, their branches holding the weight of the storm. Now and then, a clump of snow fell with a soft collapse. Merrick reached the floating debris cable shortly before 9. He switched off the motor and let the boat drift. One of the orange markers had pulled lower than the others, probably caught beneath a branch. He leaned over the side, caught the cable with a boat hook, and began working the obstruction loose. That was when he heard an engine on the maintenance road. The old bridge stood above the narrowest part of Cedar Inlet, less than 200 yards away. It had been closed to ordinary traffic for years. Only county workers, utility crews, and people ignoring large red signs had any reason to use it in winter. A gray SUV stopped near the center. Merrick straightened. 2 men climbed out. Even at that distance, their movements felt wrong. One stayed close to the driver's door and kept looking back toward the road. The other opened the rear hatch and struggled with something heavy. Merrick lifted the small binoculars he kept beneath the seat. The second man dragged out a steel cage covered by a dark tarp. For a moment, Merrick assumed it held illegal traps, perhaps stolen tools or hunting equipment somebody wanted to lose before an inspection. That would have been ugly, but ordinary. Then the tarp slipped. A black and tan paw struck weakly against the bars. Merrick stood so fast that the boat rocked beneath him. "Hey!" His voice carried sharply across the water. Both men turned. The one holding the cage froze. The other pointed toward Merrick, shouted something, and ran for the driver's seat. Merrick reached for the radio clipped near the controls. "County Dispatch, this is Duval at Cedar Inlet. Gray SUV on the maintenance bridge. 2 males. Possible animal cruelty in progress." Before the dispatcher could respond, the man at the rail shoved the cage. It struck the bridge once with a hard metallic crash. Then it disappeared over the side. The SUV doors slammed. Tires spun on packed snow, spraying white behind them. Merrick caught only part of the rear plate before the vehicle vanished between the pines. He repeated the numbers into the radio, started the motor, and pushed the boat toward the bridge. The cage hit the lake nose first. The front sank immediately. The rear twisted after it, pulled downward by a length of chain wrapped around the frame. Then the descent stopped. The chain had snagged on Merrick's floating debris cable. The cage hung at an angle beneath the surface. One upper corner caught close enough to the air that a small pocket remained inside. Water continued pouring through the bars. Merrick saw movement. One strike of a paw, then nothing. Dispatch was still speaking through the radio, asking him to remain at a safe distance until rescue personnel arrived from town. Merrick looked toward the road. The nearest team was at least 15 minutes away, probably more with snow on the county route. He looked back at the cage. 15 minutes was a reasonable response time. It was also far too long. He removed the brass whistle hanging from his jacket and placed it between his teeth, then secured a safety line around his chest. The other end went through the hand winch fixed to the boat. He checked the knot twice. There had been a time when his hands could prepare equipment in darkness while men shouted and steel groaned around him. Now his fingers were slower, and cold made the joint stiff. Slower was not the same as useless. He lowered the bolt cutters into the water, holding them by a short tether. Then he swung one leg over the boat's side. His body hesitated. That hesitation angered him until he understood it was not cowardice. It was knowledge. At 76, courage no longer meant pretending the water could not kill him. It meant going in while respecting that it could. Merrick drew one breath and dropped. The cold crushed the air from his lungs. His clothing kept out some of the water, but not the force of it. The lake closed around his ribs like iron. Pain shot through his left leg, and the calf cramped so violently that his boot twisted downward. For several seconds, he could do nothing except grip the boat line. The cage was 6 feet away. Inside, a shape floated against the upper bars. Merrick forced his cramped leg behind him and pulled himself along the debris cable. The dog became clearer beneath the blue-green water. A German shepherd, older but powerfully built. Its coat was black across the back and dark amber along the legs and face. Silver had begun to gather around the muzzle. One ear stood upright, the other tilted slightly outward, marked by a small tear along the edge. The dog's eyes were open. Deep amber eyes watched Merrick through the bars without panic. That frightened him more than struggling would have. Panic meant the body still believed escape was possible. This animal had gone still. Merrick pressed one gloved hand against the cage. The dog blinked once. It was such a small response that it felt like a decision, not hope. Not yet. Only acknowledgement. Merrick gripped the main lock with the bolt cutters. He squeezed. Nothing. He adjusted his position and tried again. The metal held. His hands were losing strength, while the cramp in his leg pulled tighter. Above him, the last pocket of air was shrinking. He released the lock and searched the cage frame. One lower bar had rusted near its weld. Merrick positioned the cutters, braced one handle against his shoulder, and forced the other inward. The bar bent. He cut again. This time it snapped. The sudden movement pushed Merrick backward. His safety line tightened and stopped him from drifting beneath the cage. He dragged himself forward, bent the broken bar aside, and opened a narrow gap. The dog did not help him. It could not. Merrick reached through, feeling along the animal's chest until he found space behind the front legs. He fed the floating toe strap through the opening and around the dog's body. His fingers had become thick, distant things. Twice the strap slipped free. On the third attempt, the buckle closed. Merrick pulled. The German shepherd's shoulders caught against the bent bars. Merrick widened the opening with both hands, tearing one glove across the palm. Rusted metal scraped the sleeve of his coat. "Come on," he tried to say. Underwater, the words became bubbles. He pulled again. The dog slid free. For one terrible second, the body sagged beneath him without movement. Merrick hauled upward on the floating strap, kicking with only his right leg. They broke the surface together. The dog's head rolled to one side. Water spilled from its mouth. Merrick dragged it against his chest. "Breathe." The dog gave a dry, broken cough. Then another. Air entered with a harsh wheeze. Merrick rested his forehead briefly against the dog's wet skull. The animal did not bark or snap. It simply surrendered its full weight against him, as if Merrick were not a stranger, but the last solid object left in the world. The tenderness of that trust nearly hurt worse than the cold. Merrick reached for the side of the boat. His left leg had stopped obeying him. He could keep the dog's head above water, but he could not lift more than 70 pounds of soaked animal over the gunwale. He tried once. His arms failed. The dog slipped lower, and Merrick caught the strap just in time. "No," he said, though the lake took most of the word. He hooked the floating line to the winch and turned the handle with both hands. The mechanism drew the dog close to the hull, holding its body partly supported by the water. Merrick pulled himself into the boat using the safety rope. He landed hard across the floorboards, gasping, his vision narrowing at the edges. The dog remained beside the boat, its head held above the surface by the strap. Merrick seized the brass whistle and blew 3 long blasts. The sound crossed the inlet. He began rowing toward shore with one oar because his other hand could no longer close properly around the grip. Each stroke moved the boat only a short distance. The shoreline seemed farther away than it had any right to be. Then a red wool hat appeared between the trees. Harlan Bexley came running down the path, carrying no coat over his striped sweater and wearing one boot only half fastened. At 71, Harlan had the broad, solid build of a man who had spent 40 years arguing with marine engines and usually winning. His great white-gray mustache bounced as he shouted, "What did you do now?" "Fishing," Merrick called back weakly. "For what, pneumonia?" Harlan waded knee-deep into the water and caught the bow line. Together, with more determination than grace, they brought the boat against the snowy bank. When Harlan saw the dog floating beside it, the humor left his face. He helped lift the animal onto a tarp, then hauled Merrick up by the back of his jacket. Merrick collapsed onto one knee. His lips were blue. His hands had gone nearly white. Harlan pulled out his phone. "You are the stupidest old man the United States Navy ever trained." "You're jealous," Merrick said through chattering teeth. "They never let you swim." "They didn't let you swim. They taught you." Apparently the lesson wore off. By the time Dr. Tobias Penn reached Merrick's cabin, the German Shepherd had been wrapped in blankets before the fire. Tobias was a lean man of 61 with round bronze-framed glasses, graying curls flattened on one side by his winter cap, and the hurried manner of someone whose patience rarely respected appointments. He examined the dog carefully, listening to its lungs and checking the gums. Severe cold stress, dehydration, sedation too, unless this dog naturally sleeps through attempted murder. Merrick sat nearby with dry clothes beneath his old green jacket, both hands wrapped around a mug he could barely feel. "Will he live?" Tobias glanced toward the dog. "If his lungs stay clear and his temperature continues rising, yes." He looked at Merrick next. "You, however, remain medically questionable." Harlan already diagnosed stupidity. For once, Harlan has shown excellent clinical judgment. They moved the dog closer to the fire and wrapped it in an old wool blanket. Merrick recognized the blue stitching along one corner. It had belonged to his wife. For years, he had kept it folded inside the cedar chest at the foot of his bed. He had told himself he was preserving it. In truth, he had been protecting it from becoming ordinary again. Now it lay around the shoulders of a half-frozen dog. Merrick felt no regret. Tobias left only after making Merrick promise to call if the dog's breathing worsened. Harlan remained until dark, fed the fire, complained about Merrick's coffee, and finally went home after threatening to return at dawn, whether invited or not. The cabin settled into silence. The dog lay on the rug, awake now but unmoving. Merrick crouched beside the stove and added another piece of wood. When he closed the iron door, the latch struck with a sharp metallic clang. The reaction was immediate. The German Shepherd scrambled backward, claws tearing at the rug. Its body hit the floor. low and rigid, before it dragged itself beneath the old sofa. A rough sound came from its throat, not aggression, but terror trapped behind exhaustion. Merrick froze. The dog's amber eyes shone from the darkness beneath the furniture. He understood then that the lake had not been the beginning of its fear. Merrick lowered himself slowly to the floor. His knee protested. His back followed. He ignored both. He did not reach beneath the sofa. He did not call the dog, offer food, or insist that the cabin was safe. Safety declared too early was only another demand. He lay on his side several feet away, leaving the animal a clear path to the door. Outside, snow began falling again, soft against the windows. Inside, the fire settled into a low red glow. Hours passed. The dog remained beneath the sofa. Merrick remained on the floor. Sometime after midnight, he heard claws move cautiously across the wood. He kept his eyes closed. The dog emerged only far enough to rest its silvered muzzle on the edge of the blanket. Merrick did not move. For the first time in years, the cabin did not feel empty. It felt as though emptiness itself had taken a breath and was waiting to see what might happen next. By morning, the storm had passed completely. Sunlight fell through the clinic windows in pale, clean rectangles, warming nothing. Bracken lay on a padded table beneath 2 wool blankets while Dr. Tobias Penn moved a scanner slowly over the loose skin between his shoulders. The German shepherd was awake now, though wakefulness seemed to cost him effort. His amber eyes followed the doctor's hands, then shifted toward Merrick whenever metal touched metal somewhere in the room. Merrick stood near the wall in his faded olive jacket, both hands wrapped in white bandages. His left leg had stiffened overnight, and each step reminded him that the body kept its own records. Tobias glanced at him over the rim of his round glasses. "You are limping." "I noticed." "You should have gone to the hospital." "I was busy." "You were unconscious for part of that busy period." "I was resting." Tobias looked toward the dog. "Is he always like this?" Bracken gave no visible response. "Good," Tobias said. "At least one of you has judgment." The scanner chirped. Tobias paused, checked the number, then entered it into the clinic computer. A moment later, the screen filled with an old registration record. "Bracken," he said. The dog's right ear shifted. Merrick looked down. "That your name?" Bracken watched him but did not move. Tobias read from the screen. "Male German Shepherd, 8 years old. Registered owner, Agnes Henslow, Bellwether Pass." The name changed the room. Until then, Bracken had been a rescued animal, a body pulled from cold water, a patient whose survival could be measured through temperature and breath. A name made him part of another life. Somewhere there was a bowl that belonged to him, a place where his fur collected beneath furniture, perhaps a hand he had learned to follow from room to room. Merrick looked at the dog differently after that. Not as something abandoned, as something taken. Tobias drew blood, checked Bracken's ribs, and examined the scar above his right front paw. No fractures, no internal bleeding. His lungs sounded rough but clear enough to avoid immediate hospitalization. The blood work explained the unnatural weakness. "Sedative," Tobias said. "Low enough that it probably wasn't meant to kill him. High enough to make loading him into a cage easier." Merrick's jaw tightened. "What kind?" "One used for noise anxiety, fireworks, thunderstorms, that sort of thing. We'll know more after the full panel." He turned the computer monitor slightly. The registration included a home telephone number. Tobias dialed it from the clinic line. It rang twice. Then the call redirected. A woman answered in a composed voice. "Henslow Residence." Tobias identified himself and asked to speak with Agnes. There was a short pause. "This is her daughter-in-law, Vanessa Henslow. Agnes is resting. What is this regarding?" "We have her dog." The silence that followed was not long enough to be suspicious. It was long enough for Merrick to notice. Vanessa recovered smoothly. "Bracken?" At the sound of her voice through the speaker, Bracken's head lifted from the blanket. Tobias's expression sharpened. "Yes," he said. "He was recovered yesterday near Silverwake Lake." "Oh, thank God." The relief sounded correct. Every word arrived in the proper place. Vanessa explained that Agnes could no longer manage such a large animal. Bracken had become unpredictable, she said. He had growled at visitors and nearly bitten a delivery driver. The family had hired 2 men to transport him to a training and rehoming facility outside the county. "What facility?" Tobias asked. Another pause. "A private place near Sandpoint. My husband arranged part of it." "Name?" "I don't have it in front of me." Merrick looked at Bracken. The dog had moved backward until his body pressed against Merrick's thigh. His breathing had quickened. He did not bark. He did not growl. He simply leaned away from the telephone. Vanessa continued, "If those men harmed him, I want them prosecuted. Of course I do, but Bracken belongs to the family. We'll collect him as soon as you release him." Tobias looked at Merrick, then at the dog. "He will not be released today." "Why not?" "Because he is evidence in a deliberate animal cruelty case." Vanessa's voice cooled by a degree. "My mother-in-law is his legal owner. Then we'll need to speak with her. I already told you she is resting. And I already told you the dog is not leaving." Tobias ended the call before Vanessa could answer. Merrick raised an eyebrow. "You often speak to clients like that?" "Only the ones who make me nostalgic for rabies." An hour later, Marisol Vega arrived from Clearwater County Animal Control. She entered carrying a hard-sided evidence kit and a clipboard thick enough to stun a bear. At 50, Marisol had a compact frame, dark hair threaded with silver and pulled into a low braid, and the steady manner of a woman accustomed to entering rooms where every person believed their version should become the official one. She greeted Tobias, nodded to Merrick, then approached Bracken without reaching for him. "Hello, old man," she said softly. "I'm going to photograph you, and neither of us is going to enjoy it." She documented the abrasion marks beneath his chest, the worn fur around his neck, the sedative result, and the redness along his gums. She also photographed the torn glove Merrick had used during the rescue and the bent section of cage recovered from the inlet. Bracken tolerated the examination until Marisol opened a small transport kennel beside the table. The metal latch clicked. He reacted before anyone could stop him. Bracken threw himself sideways, struck the wall with one shoulder, and scrambled for the narrow space beneath the exam counter. His claws scraped against tile. A low, breathless sound broke from him. Marisol immediately closed the kennel and moved it out of sight. Nobody tried to drag him back. For several seconds, the only sound was Bracken's uneven breathing beneath the counter. Marisol crouched at a distance. "The county holding building is having heating repairs," she said. "Even if it weren't, a row of steel runs would be a poor choice for him right now." Tobias looked toward Merrick. "No," Merrick answered before the question was asked. "I didn't ask yet," Tobias said. "You were going to." Marisol studied him. "You live alone?" "Yes." "Fenced property?" "No." "Other animals?" "No." "History of cruelty complaints?" Merrick looked at her. Harlan, who had arrived carrying coffee and an oversized paper bag of supplies, answered from the doorway. "Only against fish. He insults them regularly." Marisol ignored him with professional skill. Tobias folded his arms. Bracken was calmer at Merrick's cabin. He also already knows his scent. "My house is not equipped for a dog." Harlan set the bag on the counter. A new stainless steel food bowl rolled out, followed by a bag of senior dog food, 2 towels, and a thick leather leash. Everyone looked at Merrick. He looked at Harlan. Harlan lifted the bowl. "This for a literate deer?" Merrick said nothing. Harlan nodded solemnly. "Thought so." The arrangement took most of the afternoon. Marisol inspected Merrick's cabin, checked the porch, examined the distance from the house to the road, and required him to secure cleaning chemicals and tools. She made it clear that Bracken remained under county authority. Merrick could not surrender him, move him out of the county, or deny official access. He signed each page. The signature felt strangely serious. Not ownership, responsibility without possession. That distinction mattered to him more than he expected. While the paperwork proceeded, Deputy Annika Croft arrived to take Merrick's formal statement. Annika was 44, broad-shouldered beneath a navy winter police coat, with close-cut black hair and a small dark mole beneath her left eye. She carried a waterproof notebook and an orange mechanical pencil that looked almost cheerful against the severity of the morning. She did not ask about metals. She asked about the SUV. Merrick described the rear door dent, the partial plate, the driver's height, the passenger's heavier build, the direction of travel, and the exact time according to the clock mounted on his boat. Did you see either face clearly? No. Could you identify them? Not reliably. Harlan opened his mouth. Anika raised one finger without looking at him. If your answer differs, I'll ask you next. Harlan closed it again. A traffic camera had captured a gray SUV leaving the maintenance road shortly after Merrick's radio call. The plate was partially obscured by snow. It was something, but not enough. Merrick asked whether they were going to Agnes Henslow's house. Anika's pencil stopped. Not yet. Her dog was drugged and thrown into a lake. I know. The woman who answered the phone couldn't name the facility. I know that too. Then what are we waiting for? Anika looked directly at him. A frightened dog is not a witness statement. A vague phone call is not probable cause. And your instincts, however decorated, are not a warrant. Merrick disliked the answer. That did not make it wrong. Anika softened slightly. We confirm the transport story. We identify the vehicle. We speak to Agnes directly. Clean work lasts longer. Merrick thought of the cage beneath the lake and of how close impatience had come to killing them both. He nodded once. Later that day, Ruthie Sloan arrived at the clinic carrying a stack of returned library books. She was 68, small and straight-backed, with silver-brown hair cut in a soft bob and bright blue glasses hanging from a beaded cord. She had the alert expression of a woman who had spent years noticing when people skipped chapters and lied about finishing books. She stopped near the recovery area. That's Bracken. The dog raised his head. Ruthie moved closer, then stopped when his body stiffened. My goodness, she whispered. What happened to you? She knew Agnes Henslow from the Bellwether Pass Library. Agnes had once attended every Thursday reading group, Ruthie explained. Bracken often accompanied her, carrying a small canvas book satchel fastened to his harness. She claimed he chose the novels, Ruthie said. His taste leaned heavily toward books with food on the covers. For 2 months, Agnes had not visited. Vanessa told the library that Agnes was becoming forgetful and could no longer manage public outings. She had also asked Ruthie to deactivate Agnes's library account so she would not misplace books. Was Agnes confused the last time you saw her? Anika asked. Ruthie considered it carefully. She called me at home to remind me I still had her pruning shears. I borrowed them 3 years ago. Harlan murmured. Terrifying woman. Only to borrowers, Ruthie replied. Merrick wanted to go to the Henslow house immediately. Again, Anika stopped him. Ruthie's concern mattered, but concern was not permission. They would arrange a welfare check and verify Agnes's wishes through proper channels. The delay grated against Merrick, yet Bracken's presence forced his attention closer to home. Over the next few days, the dog regained enough strength to walk short distances around the cabin. He followed Merrick to the edge of the dock each morning, keeping 2 paces behind. But he would not step onto the boat. The first time the mooring chain knocked against the aluminum hull, Bracken recoiled so sharply that his hind legs slipped in the snow. Merrick secured the chain with cloth to silence it. He did not call the dog forward. Instead, he sat at the end of the dock with coffee in one hand and spoke toward the lake. The crew is currently 1 man short, he said. Benefits are poor. Supervisor is difficult. Bracken sat behind him. You'd be responsible for gull control. Bracken blinked. Promotion opportunities limited. From the shore, Harlan watched them. That dog is considering firing you. Needs authority first. He already has the bowl. By the 4th afternoon, Bracken would come close enough to rest one paw on the first dock plank, but no farther. Merrick treated the inch as if it meant nothing. Privately, he understood it was not nothing at all. That evening, snow began falling in slow, bright flakes. Ruthie called. Her voice was low. I'm across from Agnes's house. Merrick stood from the kitchen table. Why? I brought back a book Vanessa returned by mistake. No one answered. Through the window, Ruthie could see Agnes seated alone in the front room. The older woman looked thinner than Ruthie remembered. A lamp glowed beside her, though the room beyond it was dim. Ruthie moved to the edge of the property but did not trespass. She lifted her phone and displayed the photograph Tobias had taken of Bracken wrapped in blankets at the clinic. Agnes saw it. For several seconds, she did not move. Then she rose slowly and approached the glass. She did not open the door. She did not wave. She lifted one finger and wrote through the fog gathered on the inside of the window. One word. Bracken? Ruthie read it aloud over the phone. Merrick looked toward the rug where Bracken had lifted his head at the sound of his name. Somewhere inside that bright, carefully kept house, an old woman was still waiting for her dog. And for the first time since the lake, Merrick understood that the cage might not have been the only prison involved. The Henslow house stood on the north side of Bellwether Pass, where the road narrowed between white aspens and climbed toward the low ridge above town. From a distance, it looked like the sort of place people pointed out during winter drives. A green wreath hung on the front door. Warm lights traced the porch roof. Snow had been swept from the walkway in two neat lines, and every window glowed with the steady amber light of a home that appeared prepared for company. Merrick distrusted perfection more than neglect. Neglect often admitted what it was. Perfection usually wanted witnesses. Deputy Annika Croft parked her cruiser at the curb and shut off the engine. She remained behind the wheel for a moment, reviewing the notes in her waterproof book. "This is a welfare check," she said, "not an interrogation." Merrick sat beside her with Bracken's old leather collar inside a plain paper bag on his lap. "I know. You are here because you are his temporary caretaker and because Agnes is still the registered owner. I know. You do not accuse anyone. I know." Annika looked at him. "You say that the way men say 'I know' shortly before proving they do not." Merrick turned his gaze toward the house. Bracken had remained at Tobias Penn's clinic. Marisol Vega had decided that bringing him to the property would create unnecessary stress and might influence the conversation before anyone understood what had happened. Merrick had agreed, though part of him wanted Agnes to see the dog with her own eyes. The larger part understood that truth should not have to enter a room on a leash. They crossed the walkway. Before Annika could knock a second time, Vanessa Henslow opened the door. She was taller than Merrick expected, slender and composed in a beige wool coat worn over a dark green turtleneck. Her chestnut hair lay smooth against her shoulders, untouched by the damp air outside. One hand held a silver fountain pen, though there was no paper nearby. Her smile appeared quickly and stopped before reaching her gray-brown eyes. "Deputy Croft," she said, "I wish someone had called first. A scheduled welfare check tells us less than an unscheduled one." Vanessa's fingers turned the cap of the pen once, then again. "Of course." She looked at Merrick. "And you must be the man who found Bracken." "Merrick Duval." "Yes, I know." The way she said it made the words feel less like recognition than inventory. Vanessa stepped aside. The air inside smelled of cinnamon, polished wood, and something medicinal hidden beneath both. A narrow table beside the door held a bowl of pine cones arranged around a white candle. Boots stood in a perfect row beneath it. No mail, gloves, grocery bags, or ordinary clutter interrupted the careful scene. The living room was warm enough to make Merrick's old jacket uncomfortable. A fire burned behind a brass screen. Pillows sat evenly spaced across a cream-colored sofa. Framed photographs covered one wall, Agnes beside a greenhouse, Agnes with a younger man. Merrick assumed was her son, Agnes kneeling beside a younger Bracken whose muzzle had not yet turned silver. Vanessa followed his gaze. "My mother-in-law loved that dog," she said. "That is what makes this so difficult." The sentence placed love safely in the past. Annika noticed. Merrick could tell by the way her orange pencil paused above the page. Vanessa offered them tea. Annika declined. Merrick did not answer. A tray had already been prepared on the coffee table. 3 cups, cinnamon sticks, folded napkins, and a small porcelain bowl of sugar suggested that Vanessa had expected the visit despite claiming otherwise. She took a seat in an armchair angled toward the hallway. "Agnes has good days and difficult days," she began. "Lately, more difficult than good. She forgets medication, leaves doors open, becomes fixated on things. Bracken made it worse." "How?" Annika asked. "He is a large dog, strong. She could no longer control him. He growled at visitors and lunged at a delivery driver last month. Was the incident reported? No, the driver was kind enough not to make trouble. Do you have his name? Vanessa's pen cap turned under her thumb. I could find it. Merrick watched the hallway. He heard a soft movement beyond the doorway. Not footsteps exactly. Fabric brushing against a wall, followed by the tap of something wooden against the floor. Vanessa heard it too. Agnes, she called, her voice warming instantly. We have visitors. Agnes Henslow appeared a moment later. She was small, perhaps 5'3", wearing a loose gray-blue cardigan over a cream blouse and a dark wool skirt. Her white hair curved softly around her chin, held on one side by a wooden clip shaped like a leaf. A cane supported her left side. Nothing about her face suggested the emptiness Merrick had expected after Vanessa's description. Her hazel eyes were alert, though heavy-lidded. The slowness in her movements felt less like confusion than resistance against an invisible weight. She looked first at Anika, then at Merrick. Her hand tightened around the cane. Vanessa rose and guided her toward the sofa, though Agnes had not asked for help. Sit here, Mom. Agnes's mouth shifted slightly at the word. She sat. Vanessa placed one hand on her shoulder and remained standing behind her. Anika introduced herself and explained the purpose of the visit in clear, ordinary language. She did not mention crimes, accusations, or suspicions. She asked whether Agnes understood why they were there. My dog, Agnes said. Her voice was quiet but distinct. Yes, Anika replied. Bracken was found near Silverwake Lake. Agnes's eyes moved toward Merrick again. Vanessa's hand remained on her shoulder. Anika asked, Did you agree to have Bracken taken from the house? A long pause followed. Agnes looked down at the rug. Yes. Merrick felt something inside him draw tight. Did you want him taken to a training facility? Yes. Why? Agnes swallowed. He was becoming difficult. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. The doctor said stress could worsen her confusion. Anika did not look at her. I asked Agnes. The room became still. Agnes lifted her head. He was too much for me. The words sounded practiced, but Merrick knew practiced words could still be true. He had given them himself in offices, hospitals, and military debriefings. I'm fine. It was necessary. Nothing else could be done. He did not trust the sentence. He also did not have the right to discard it. Did Bracken ever bite anyone? Anika asked. No. Did he frighten you? Agnes hesitated. Vanessa's fingers pressed lightly into the cardigan at her shoulder. Agnes said, Sometimes. Merrick looked at the pressure of that hand, the lowered eyes, the careful rhythm between question and answer. He had once believed observation was a kind of truth. In the water, it often was. A cable strained or it did not. A valve opened or it remained closed. A diver's breathing changed, and delay became death. Human rooms were different. A hand on a shoulder could be comfort. It could also be a lock. Merrick placed the paper bag on his knees. I brought something, he said. Vanessa's eyes sharpened. Anika glanced at him but did not stop him. Merrick opened the bag and removed Bracken's collar. The leather was dark brown, scratched near the buckle, still carrying a faint smell of lake water despite Tobias's cleaning. The brass tag had been removed for evidence processing, leaving only a lighter circle where it had rested for years. Merrick did not approach Agnes. He placed the collar on the coffee table between them. He survived, Merrick said. Agnes looked at it. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the tiredness vanished from her face. Her eyes widened. Her body came forward so suddenly that the cane fell against the sofa. She reached toward the collar with both hands. Alive? The word broke out of her with more force than anything she had said before. Vanessa caught her shoulder. Careful, you'll fall. Agnes did not look at Vanessa. Alive? She asked again. Yes, Merrick said. He's recovering. Her fingers hovered inches above the collar. Merrick saw the smallest details change. The tremor in her lower lip, the sudden color in her cheeks, the way her breathing quickened as though some sealed room inside her had been opened. For that moment, she was not confused. She was not distant. She was a woman hearing that someone she loved had returned from the dead. Vanessa moved around the sofa and stood between Agnes and the table. "This is exactly why I asked for warning," she said. "Emotional shocks are not good for her." Agnes's hand remained extended. Then Vanessa looked down at her. The change in Agnes was almost invisible. Her fingers curled inward, her shoulders lowered. The light in her face retreated behind caution. She drew her hand back. "I don't want him here," she said. Merrick stared at her. Agnes looked at the collar rather than at him. "He should stay somewhere else." "Agnes," Annika said gently, "do you want Bracken returned to you?" "No." The answer came more quickly this time. Merrick felt foolish for the hope he had allowed himself. More than foolish, dangerous. He had come expecting the room to reveal itself if he watched carefully enough. Instead, every observation produced two possible meanings. Agnes might be frightened. Agnes might also be telling the truth. Vanessa might be controlling her. Vanessa might also be caring for a woman whose condition changed by the hour. Merrick had spent years resenting officials who trusted paperwork over the person standing in front of them. Now he was in danger of committing the opposite error, trusting his instincts so completely that Agnes's own words became inconvenient. Annika asked if she could speak with Agnes alone. Vanessa objected immediately, saying Agnes became anxious when separated from familiar people. Annika remained calm. "It is standard practice." Agnes looked toward Vanessa before answering. "I want her to stay." That closed the matter for the moment. The visit continued for another 20 minutes. The refrigerator was stocked. The heat worked. Prescription bottles carried valid labels. No bruises were visible. Agnes knew the date within 1 day, named the president correctly, and understood where she was. None of it proved she was safe. None of it proved she was not. When Merrick rose to leave, Agnes finally looked at him. There was no plea in her expression. That would have been easier. There was only a tired, guarded sadness that he could not translate without risking turning her into a story of his own invention. Outside, the cold struck him with relief. Annika waited until they reached the cruiser. "You saw it," Merrick said. "I saw several things." "She wanted that collar." "Yes." Vanessa stopped her. She stopped her from standing too fast. Merrick turned toward her. "You believe that?" "I believe we document what happened. We do not improve it into certainty." He looked back at the warm windows. "She's afraid." "Maybe." "Maybe?" Annika's face hardened. "Maybe is where honest work starts." Merrick said nothing on the drive back. By evening, snow clouds had gathered over Silverwake Lake. Bracken met him at the cabin door, moving stiffly but with more strength than the day before. Merrick hung his jacket, fed the stove, and avoided the dog's gaze. He had expected Agnes's love for Bracken to simplify everything. Instead, love had become another thing that could be hidden, denied, or used as evidence only by people impatient enough to misunderstand it. After dark, Merrick pulled the cedar chest from beneath his bed. Inside lay a flat tin box. He opened it on the kitchen table. Medals rested against faded velvet. Beneath them were photographs of men in diving gear, faces younger than Merrick remembered ever being. At the bottom lay an old pressure-resistant watch with a cracked black band. The watch had belonged to Daniel Rowe, the diver Merrick had failed to bring home from his final mission. Merrick had kept every object while convincing himself that keeping them meant honoring the dead. Tonight they looked less like memories than accusations. He lifted one medal. It had been awarded for a rescue people still called extraordinary. The citation used clean language, controlled ascent, sustained risk, preservation of life. It did not mention Daniel. Merrick considered placing everything in a donation box for the Veterans Center. What use were medals proving he had once saved men if he could do nothing for a woman 30 miles away? The medal slipped from his fingers. It struck the table with a bright metallic crack. Bracken recoiled, his hind legs slid across the floor, and he scrambled backward into the corner beside the wood box. His body lowered, eyes wide, breath coming quickly. Merrick's frustration disappeared. He knelt, then stopped several feet away. "Easy." Bracken pressed closer to the wall. Merrick gathered the medals one at a time. He wrapped each in a cloth before placing it back into the tin box, making no further sound. He did not apologize with touch. He changed what he was doing. When the box was closed, Merrick remained on the floor. Minutes passed. Bracken's breathing slowed. At last, the dog left the corner. He did not come all the way to Merrick. He lay down just beyond the reach of Merrick's hand. The distance was small. The choice belonged entirely to Bracken. Merrick looked toward the closed tin box. He understood then what the house had tried to teach him. A locked door could be forced, fear could not. If Agnes was trapped, she did not need Merrick to break into her life and carry her out like a body from water. She needed room, evidence, and a moment in which her own decision could survive the pressure around it. The following afternoon, Ruthie Sloane received a canvas tote of returned library books. Vanessa brought them to the circulation desk and placed the bag down with an apologetic smile. Agnes won't be needing these anymore. Ruthie looked through the titles. Did she say that? She can't keep track of them. Vanessa's silver pen turned twice in her hand. Ruthie did not argue. She accepted the books and watched Vanessa leave through the glass doors. Later, while checking the pages for damage, Ruthie opened a gardening memoir Agnes had borrowed months earlier. A pressed sprig of lavender slipped onto the desk. Ruthie picked it up carefully. Agnes had used lavender as a bookmark for years, but never at random. During the library discussion group, she placed it beside passages she intended to challenge, defend, or question. Ruthie opened the book to the marked page. The chapter concerned older adults whose decisions were dismissed because accepting those decisions made life less convenient for their families. The flower was not proof. It was not a secret code. It did not tell Ruthie what had happened inside the Henslow house, but it reminded her of everything she had allowed herself to treat separately. Agnes's canceled library card, the unanswered telephone calls, Vanessa's questions about land values and county zoning, Agnes's old insistence that she would never sell the house while she could still tend the aspens. Ruthie sat at her desk long after the library closed. Then she called Clearwater County Adult Protective Services. The report reached Elena Wardell the next morning. Elena was 52, with short brown curls threaded with silver and a dark olive coat folded across the back of her chair. A small pin shaped like an open door rested on her cream blouse. She listened without interrupting, asked Ruthie to separate facts from impressions, and wrote down only what could be attributed to a source. She did not declare that Agnes was being abused. She requested records, arranged interviews, and noted a cluster of concerns: social isolation, redirected communication, sedating medication, disputed statements about property, and the unexplained removal of a companion animal. By the end of the day, Bracken's case no longer stood alone. The question was not simply why someone had wanted a dog gone. It was what became easier inside the Henslow house once he was no longer there. The complaint arrived before sunrise. Merrick found the envelope wedged beneath the cabin door when he returned from letting Bracken outside. The county seal sat in the upper corner, crisp and official. Snow had dampened the bottom edge, but the printed words inside remained perfectly dry. Notice of temporary access suspension. Until the county completed a review, Merrick could no longer use the maintenance shed, fuel locker, or volunteer equipment assigned to shoreline cleanup around Silverwake Lake. He read the letter twice. The first time he absorbed the words. The second time he recognized the method. No one accused him of a crime. No one ordered him off his own property. The county had simply placed uncertainty around his name and stepped back to see what the uncertainty would do. Bracken watched from the kitchen doorway. The German shepherd had gained enough strength to stand without trembling, though his ribs still showed beneath the dark amber fur along his sides. His right ear tilted outward, giving him the solemn look of someone who had already judged the letter and found it beneath contempt. Merrick folded the paper. "Administrative weather," he said. Bracken sneezed. "Exactly." By noon, the rest of Bellwether Pass had heard. Vanessa had posted a carefully worded statement in the community group. She did not call Merrick dangerous. She expressed concern. She did not say he had stolen Bracken. She said a vulnerable older woman's property was being withheld by a man who had become emotionally involved. She mentioned Merrick's military background only once, asking people to show compassion toward veterans who might struggle with isolation and fixation after service. The cruelty lay in the softness. At Bailey's Market, two women stopped talking when Merrick entered. A man who usually waved from the hardware store window looked down at his register instead. Near the lake road, a county employee loading salt into a truck gave Merrick a brief nod, then seemed to regret even that. Harlan arrived at the cabin carrying a cardboard box filled with canned soup, spare gloves, and 3 items Merrick had not requested. "You're under siege," Harlan announced. "I noticed. I brought provisions." "You brought beans." "Beans have outlived governments." Harlan set the box down, removed his red wool hat, and looked at the county notice on the table. His large white-gray mustache lowered at the corners. "You could end half this nonsense in 10 minutes. "How?" "Put your service record online, medals, commendations, tell people who you were." Merrick placed another piece of wood into the stove. "Those papers prove I completed missions. They prove you're not some unstable drifter. They don't prove I'm right about Agnes." Harlan frowned. "That woman at the house is lying." "Maybe." "You don't believe maybe." "I believe belief is not evidence." Harlan looked toward Bracken, who had settled near the stove but still kept his eyes on both men. "You sound like Croft." "She's usually irritating for a reason." "That may be the ugliest compliment I've ever heard." Merrick picked up the suspension notice and placed it in a drawer. The old impulse was returning. Not anger exactly. Anger burned hot and spent itself. This was colder, the instinct to withdraw before a system could reduce him to a version of himself he no longer recognized. Years earlier, military medical files had listed the wrong dates, omitted an injury, and sent his appeal through 3 offices that seemed to communicate only by losing one another's paperwork. He had learned then how quickly a man could become a problem instead of a person. Vanessa had somehow sensed the scar without seeing it. That afternoon, Elena Wardell called. Clearwater County Adult Protective Services had arranged a formal private meeting for the following day. Agnes would attend with Vanessa. A temporary legal representative and a county medical liaison would also be present. Merrick would not be allowed into the first portion of the meeting. "You understand why," Elena said. "Yes." "Do you?" "No, but I understand the sentence." Elena paused. "I know this process feels slow." "Slow is fine." "That does not sound sincere." "It isn't." She almost laughed, but the weight in her voice remained. "You may be called in to explain Bracken's condition and the temporary custody arrangement. Answer only what you know." "I will." "And Merrick?" "Yes?" "Do not mistake being excluded from part of the process for being ignored." After the call ended, Merrick remained seated at the kitchen table. Bracken came over and rested his muzzle against Merrick's knee. The gesture had become more frequent over the past few days. Not neat exactly, something closer to checking whether Merrick was still present. Merrick placed one hand on the dog's neck. "Apparently," he said, "we're both property disputes now." Bracken leaned harder against him. The county offices occupied a low brick building near the courthouse. By 10 the next morning, melting snow had filled the parking lot with gray slush. Merrick waited in a narrow hallway outside Conference Room B. The walls were decorated with framed photographs of Idaho lakes, all taken during summer. Blue water, green trees, people smiling from docks without snow or danger anywhere in sight. Across from him sat Marisol Vega, a thick case folder balanced on one knee. Tobias Penn stood near the drinking fountain, reading a medical report through his round glasses. Anika Croft moved between rooms with her orange mechanical pencil clipped to her notebook. No one offered false reassurance. That helped. Inside the conference room, Elena sat at one end of the long table. Beside her was a county medical liaison Merrick had not met and a temporary attorney appointed to ensure Agnes understood the proceedings. Vanessa had placed several folders in front of her: prescription lists, appointment summaries, a copy of the caregiving power of attorney, and handwritten notes documenting episodes of forgetfulness. Agnes sat beside her. When the door opened briefly, Merrick caught sight of the older woman's blue-gray cardigan and the wooden leaf clip in her white hair. She looked tired, but her eyes were alert. The door closed again. Merrick waited. He had spent hours outside sealed rooms before. Military briefings, surgical wards. Offices where men decided whether an injury counted because the form describing it had arrived late. Waiting was never empty. It filled itself with every outcome a person feared. Nearly 40 minutes passed before Annika opened the door. "They're ready for you." Merrick entered alone. Agnes looked directly at him. Vanessa did not. Merrick sat in the chair indicated by Elena. The room smelled faintly of coffee, toner, and wet wool. Elena explained that Merrick was present only to answer questions concerning Bracken and his contacts with Agnes. The temporary attorney, a narrow-faced man with silver glasses, asked whether Merrick had gone to the Henslow house without law enforcement. "No." "Did you ever ask Agnes to transfer ownership of Bracken to you?" "No." "Did you tell her Vanessa had tried to kill the dog?" "No." Vanessa lifted her head. "But you implied it." Merrick looked at Elena. "Am I answering her?" "No," Elena said. The attorney continued. "Did you believe Agnes was being pressured during the welfare check?" "Yes." "What did you do?" "Nothing." The answer seemed to surprise the room. "Nothing?" the attorney repeated. "I observed. Deputy Croft conducted the visit. Agnes stated she did not want the dog returned. I left." Vanessa uncapped her silver pin, then closed it again. The attorney turned toward Agnes. "Mrs. Henslow, do you believe Mr. Duval has pressured you?" Agnes did not look at Vanessa. She looked at Merrick. "Yes." The word landed without force. That made it worse. Merrick did not move. The attorney asked, "How?" Agnes's hands rested together on the table. One thumb rubbed the knuckle of the other. "He keeps involving himself." "Do you want him to stop?" "Yes." "Do you want Bracken returned to the family?" Agnes drew a breath. "Yes." For several seconds, Merrick heard only the low hum of the heating system. He could have argued. He could have described the way Agnes had reached for the collar. He could have pointed to her hand now, to the tension in her shoulders, to the careful stillness in Vanessa's face. But every argument began with the same dangerous assumption, that Agnes's words belonged to everyone except Agnes. Merrick had spent years furious at institutions that trusted a file more than the man standing in front of them. He would not now decide that his interpretation mattered more than the woman speaking. He looked at Elena. "I will comply with whatever lawful custody decision is made." Vanessa's expression shifted slightly. She had expected resistance. Agnes's face did not change, only her fingers stopped moving. Elena asked whether Merrick had anything else to add. "No." The meeting ended without resolution. Marisol would retain temporary authority over Bracken while the animal cruelty investigation continued. No transfer would occur that day. Merrick stood. He felt neither defeated nor relieved. He felt erased by his own decision to do the right thing. In the hallway, people moved around one another, gathering coats and files. Vanessa stopped beside Elena to discuss the next medical appointment. Agnes walked past Merrick with her cane tapping softly against the tile. For one moment, they were separated from the others by no more than a step. She did not turn her head. Her voice was barely more than breath. "Don't let her take him back to that house." Merrick's body went still. Agnes kept walking. Vanessa reached for her elbow. Merrick said nothing. He watched the older woman leave through the glass doors, her blue coat moving slowly behind Vanessa's beige one. The denial inside the room had not been the truth. It had been protection. Not protection for Agnes, for him. Elena found him near the stairwell 10 minutes later. "You heard something?" It was not a question. Merrick looked toward the lobby. "She asked me to keep Bracken away from the house." Elena's expression tightened, but she did not celebrate the revelation. "Exact words?" He repeated them. She wrote them down. Then she asked, "Why deny you in the meeting?" "I don't know." Elena did not accept that. "You have an idea." Merrick remembered Agnes's eyes, the county notice, Vanessa's post, the way public doubt had gathered around him in less than 48 hours. "She thinks Vanessa can hurt me through the system." Elena later obtained permission to speak with Agnes briefly without Vanessa in the room. Agnes did not describe physical violence. She described warnings. Vanessa had told her Merrick could be sued for keeping Bracken. She said the county might remove him from the shoreline program permanently. She suggested investigators would view his military history as evidence of instability and that he could spend years defending himself against accusations of manipulating a vulnerable woman. None of those threats guaranteed success. They did not need to. Agnes knew Merrick had fought incorrect military records for years. Ruthie had once heard him mention it during a veterans fundraiser, and Vanessa had gathered enough pieces from town gossip to understand where pressure would hurt. Agnes had decided that if she rejected Merrick publicly, Vanessa might leave him alone. It was not surrender. It was an old woman placing herself between a weapon and someone else. Elena did not yet have enough to remove Agnes from the house against her will. But the private statement changed the risk assessment. Medical oversight would increase. Adult Protective Services would continue its inquiry. Vanessa would no longer be treated as the only reliable narrator of Agnes's condition. Bracken, meanwhile, would not return to the Henslow property. Marisol transferred him back to Tobias's clinic for several days while the county reviewed the new statements. The arrangement was legal and cautious. To Bracken, it was abandonment all over again. The first night, he refused food. Tobias tried warm broth, softened kibble, and pieces of cooked chicken. Bracken turned his head away from each offering. He lay near the clinic's interior glass door, facing the corridor. When Merrick arrived after dark, Tobias met him near reception. "He has not eaten since noon." Merrick looked through the glass. Bracken was awake. "Can I go in?" Tobias studied the dog. "Probably." Merrick did not open the door. Instead, he lowered himself to the floor outside the enclosure. His left knee made the descent awkward. He settled against the wall and placed one palm flat on the tile. Bracken watched him. The glass divided them cleanly. Warm air on one side, cooler corridor on the other. No bars, no lock visible from the dog's position. Still a separation. Merrick did not call his name. Minutes passed. Tobias dimmed the reception lights and went to the back room, leaving them alone. Bracken finally raised his head. He stood slowly, joints stiff, and crossed the enclosure. At the glass he lowered one paw. For a moment it hovered above the floor, then he placed it against the other side of Merrick's hand, pad to palm, glass between them. Merrick closed his eyes. He had spent most of his life thinking loyalty meant staying when ordered, enduring when necessary, and returning for those who could not return alone. Bracken offered a simpler definition. Loyalty was not ownership, it was recognition. Two living things choosing the same side of the distance, even when they could not yet cross it. The gas station camera had not captured the crime. It had captured something less dramatic and more useful. A gray SUV, a dent behind the rear passenger door, and a man buying fuel with a debit card at 8:17 on the morning Bracken was thrown into Silverwake Lake. Deputy Annika Croft stood in the back office of the station while the owner replayed the footage frame by frame. Outside, snowmelt dripped steadily from the edge of the roof. Inside, the old monitor painted every face in a sickly shade of blue. The man at the pump was broad through the shoulders, with a shaved head and a brown work jacket stretched tight across his back. The receipt identified him as Brent Saylor, 37. Annika found his name attached to a small animal transport business that had once been licensed and no longer was. The county had suspended the permit 8 months earlier after complaints about overcrowded crates and incomplete transfer records. The passenger proved easier to identify. Colby Ness, 41, worked roofing jobs around Bellwether Pass and owed Brent money from a failed equipment purchase. In the camera footage, Colby stood near the rear of the SUV smoking with both hands cupped around the cigarette. Every few seconds he glanced toward the vehicle as if something inside made him uneasy. Neither man volunteered the truth. Brent claimed Vanessa Henslow had hired them to deliver Bracken to a private rescue facility outside the county. He said the facility refused the dog because they lacked a signed ownership transfer from Agnes. After that, according to Brent, Colby suggested leaving Bracken in the woods. Colby gave a different version. Brent, he said, had planned everything and promised Vanessa the problem would disappear. Colby insisted he had only driven along because he needed the money. Each man described himself as weak but not cruel. Annika had met that species before. People often believed guilt belonged to the person who formed the worst sentence aloud. Everyone else considered themselves merely present. She requested warrants for phone records, vehicle location data, and deleted messages. Until the court approved them, she kept both men under separate questioning and made no promises. Merrick heard the development from Anika at Dr. Penn's clinic. Bracken was still housed there under Marisol Vega's authority, though Tobias had converted a storage room into something less like confinement. The metal shelves had been removed. A thick rug covered the floor. The door remained open whenever staff were present. Merrick sat at a folding table while Anika spread copies of permitted records between them. He did not ask to see confidential material. He only helped organize times already lawfully obtained: the gas purchase, the camera footage, Merrick's radio call, and the SUV passing the county road sensor. His old skill was not investigation. It was sequence. Underwater, confusion killed quickly. A man survived by knowing what happened first, what pressure changed next, and which failure caused the one after it. At the table, Merrick wrote each verified event on a separate index card. Harlan stood behind him eating crackers from Tobias's supply cabinet. "You know," Harlan said, "normal retirees play cards for money. These are not playing cards. That explains why nobody is enjoying it." Anika ignored him and moved one card 3 inches to the left. "The rescue facility confirmed Brent called that morning," she said. "They refused intake because he could not show the owner's signature." Merrick studied the gap between that call and the gas station footage. "What happened during these 11 minutes? "That," Anika replied, "is what everyone is lying about differently." The warrants arrived the following day. Colby's phone contained a short video he had apparently recorded as proof that Bracken had been loaded. The image shook badly. It showed the open rear hatch of the SUV and part of a steel cage. Bracken lay inside, his head low and his legs folded awkwardly beneath him. He was conscious, but barely. A woman's voice came through the speakerphone. "I don't care where you take him. He does not come back to that house." The video ended there. No order to drown the dog. No mention of the lake. No clean confession. Still, the sentence destroyed Vanessa's claim that she believed Bracken was on his way to a safe training facility. Anika played it only once in Merrick's presence. He watched Bracken's body sway slightly with the movement of the vehicle. The room seemed to narrow around him. He had seen the dog frightened. He had seen him weak, cold, and unwilling to approach a boat. This was different. The video showed the moment before Bracken understood that the people around him had stopped treating him as a living creature and begun treating him as an obstacle. Merrick pushed his chair back. That enough? For the whole case? No. For her lie? Yes. Anika shut the phone screen off. One piece can be challenged. A chain is harder. The chain grew slowly. Tobias confirmed that the sedative in Bracken's blood matched medication prescribed a year earlier for storm anxiety. The prescription had been issued legally after Bracken panicked during 4th of July fireworks. The clinic record showed that most of the tablets should have remained unused. The pharmacy record showed Vanessa had collected the refill for Agnes. That brought Paula Denby into the case. Paula was 59, with cropped gray hair, careful hands, and the direct expression of someone who had spent decades listening to people explain why they needed medication earlier than authorized. She worked behind the counter of Bellwether Pharmacy and remembered Vanessa because she had repeatedly asked whether someone other than the named owner could collect veterinary medication. Paula did not offer opinions. She provided dates, signatures, and the record required by the warrant. Brent changed his statement after Anika showed him the pharmacy timeline. Vanessa, he admitted, had given them a paper bag containing pieces of meat. She instructed them to wait until Bracken became unsteady before forcing him into the cage. She said he might bite, Brent told Anika. Did he? No. Did he try? Brent looked down. No. According to Brent, the rescue facility's refusal caused Vanessa to become angry. She repeated that Bracken could not return to the house. Brent still claimed Colby chose the lake. Colby continued blaming Brent. The evidence did not make either man innocent. It merely gave their lies edges. While Anika built the animal cruelty case, Elena Wardell arranged for Agnes to be examined by an independent geriatric physician. Dr. Simone Avery practiced in Coeur d'Alene, far enough from Bellwether Pass that family reputation carried little weight in her office. She was 57, tall and calm, with deep brown skin, silver beginning at her temples, and a voice that never became louder, simply because someone resisted a question. Vanessa was not permitted in the examination room. Agnes spent nearly 3 hours with Simone over 2 appointments. The assessment covered memory, judgment, finances, medication, daily routines, and Agnes's understanding of the risks around her. The result was neither simple nor convenient. Agnes had mild age-related memory impairment. She sometimes misplaced recent details and needed written reminders for appointments. But she understood her property, her relationships, the consequences of legal decisions, and the difference between support and control. She had legal capacity. Her sluggishness had likely been worsened by sedating medication, poor sleep, limited movement, and prolonged stress. Simone also reviewed the records of Agnes's family doctor. She found no evidence that he had conspired with Vanessa. His failure was quieter and more common. He had accepted the caregiver's description of the patient and had never required a private conversation with Agnes. Elena told Merrick the result in the clinic parking lot. "So she knew what she was saying," he said. "Yes." "Even when she denied me?" "Yes." The answer hurt, but differently now. Agnes had not spoken falsely because she lacked understanding. She had chosen her words under pressure. That distinction returned something important to her. Merrick looked toward the clinic windows. "Then stop calling her confused." Elena's expression softened. "That is exactly what the report does." Later, Anika gave Merrick a limited set of authorized call logs connected to Agnes's home phone. He placed them beside the timeline cards. Most outgoing calls to Martin Henslow in Alaska occurred late in the evening. Pharmacy records showed Agnes's sedating medication was usually administered shortly before them. The calls were brief. Many had been redirected through Vanessa's mobile phone. Merrick found Martin's work number through information Elena was permitted to share. He called from the clinic office while Anika remained present. The connection was poor. Wind rattled somewhere on the other end. Martin Henslow answered with the impatience of a man interrupted in a place where interruptions usually meant equipment failure. He was 55, working a maintenance rotation at a remote pipeline station in Alaska. His voice was deeper than Agnes's, but carried the same clipped rhythm when irritated. Merrick introduced himself. Martin already knew the name. "My wife says you're harassing my mother." "I'm calling about Bracken." "You mean the dog you won't return?" "The dog pulled from a cage in a lake." Silence came through the line. Then Martin said, "Vanessa told me the transport men went off plan." "Maybe they did." "You think she ordered it?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Merrick looked at Anika. She gave no sign for him to continue or stop. So he kept the conversation narrow. He sent Martin 3 items: a photograph of Bracken on the day of rescue, the permitted record showing Agnes's calls had been forwarded, and a single written question. "When did your mother personally tell you she wanted to sell her house?" Martin did not answer for several hours. When he finally called back, his anger had thinned into confusion. "She didn't," he said. "Vanessa said they discussed it." "Did Agnes ever say she wanted Bracken removed?" A pause. "No, not directly." Martin began reviewing old calls and messages from his work quarters. He noticed what Merrick had already seen. His mother sounded tired during nearly every conversation, while Vanessa often entered the call, summarized what Agnes meant, and ended it before Agnes finished speaking. Still, Martin resisted. "Caring for her has been hard," he said. "You don't know what Vanessa has dealt with." "No," Merrick replied. "I don't." The lack of argument unsettled Martin more than accusation might have. Merrick added, "Listen to the calls again, not to what Vanessa says, to what your mother does not finish." That night, Martin found one recording automatically saved by his work communication system. Agnes had said, "I don't feel right after the evening pills." Martin heard himself interrupt. "Mom, please, Vanessa is there. Listen to her." The conversation moved on. For the first time, Martin could not blame distance, static, or his wife for the sentence in his own voice. Several days later, Agnes was allowed to visit Bracken at Tobias's clinic. Elena, Marisol, and Merrick remained nearby, but the room was kept quiet. Agnes entered wearing her blue-gray cardigan and using her cane. Without Vanessa beside her, she seemed no younger, but more present. Bracken stood near the far wall. He did not rush forward. His body became perfectly still. His ears rose, and his eyes fixed on Agnes with such intensity that Merrick wondered whether memory could hurt physically. Agnes stopped. "Oh, my dear boy." Bracken did not move. Agnes lowered herself toward the floor. Her left knee resisted, and Elena stepped forward, but Agnes lifted one hand. "Let me." She sat with her back against the wall, Kane laid beside her. "Bracken." She said his name once. The dog took a step. Then another. Halfway across the room, he stopped and looked toward Merrick. Merrick did not gesture. The choice was not his. Bracken continued. He reached Agnes and placed his silvered head in her lap. Agnes folded both arms around his neck. She did not sob. She pressed her cheek against his fur and repeated the same words in a low voice. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did not keep you safe." Bracken released a long breath and allowed his weight to settle against her. Merrick remained beside the doorway. The moment belonged to neither the county nor the case. It belonged to a woman and the animal who had waited for her. Afterward, Agnes asked to speak with Merrick. Bracken lay between them, one paw resting across her shoe. "I cannot take him home," she said. Merrick looked at her. "He's yours." "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "And because he is mine, I am asking you to keep him." "For how long?" "Until I know where I will be." Merrick looked down at Bracken. The dog's eyes were closed, but his paw remained against Agnes. "He'll have a place with me," Merrick said, "but he still belongs to you." Agnes touched the torn edge of Bracken's right ear. "Then keep him somewhere he can return to," she said, "until I find a place of my own." Naomi Kersey did not begin by asking Agnes what had happened. She began by asking what Agnes wanted to happen next. The question seemed simple, but Agnes sat with it for a long moment. They were in a private conference room at the county offices, far from the Henslow house and its carefully arranged silence. Snow pressed white against the windows. A small heater clicked beneath the table, filling the pauses with a mechanical patience. Naomi was 63, with silver hair cut close around her jaw and a calm face that seemed built for hearing difficult truths without rearranging them into something more convenient. She wore a dark plum jacket over a cream blouse and carried no oversized briefcase, only a narrow leather folder and a pair of reading glasses suspended on a black cord. "I want my own keys," Agnes said at last. Naomi wrote that down. "I want my bank statement sent to me." She wrote again. "I want to decide when I take my medicine." Another line. "And I want people to stop asking Vanessa what I mean." Naomi placed the pen down. "Those are clear instructions." Agnes looked almost surprised. For months, clarity had been treated like something other people needed to approve. Dr. Simone Avery's evaluation had confirmed that Agnes understood her finances, property, relationships, and the consequences of legal decisions. Mild memory lapses did not erase her capacity. Stress and medication had blurred her speed, not her judgment. That distinction opened a door. Naomi stepped through it carefully. The financial power of attorney Vanessa held was broad. It allowed her to speak with banks, manage bills, request property valuations, and communicate with medical providers. It did not automatically give her the right to sell Agnes's home without further documentation, but Vanessa had already used it to contact a resort development company interested in land near the North Ridge. No sale contract existed, no deed had changed hands. But an appraisal had been ordered, preliminary documents had been prepared, and a real estate agent had exchanged emails with Vanessa about timing the transition before the spring market. Agnes read the printed messages twice. "She called my life a transition." Naomi did not soften it. "Yes." Agnes placed one hand over the wooden leaf clip resting near her temple, as though checking that something familiar still belonged to her. "I told her I would not sell." "Did you put that in writing?" "No." "That does not make your decision less real." Naomi prepared a formal revocation of the power of attorney. The document named the prior authority, withdrew it in full, and directed every institution involved to stop accepting Vanessa's instructions. Agnes signed before an independent notary. Her hand trembled slightly on the first letter. She stopped. For a moment, everyone in the room remained still. Then Agnes straightened the page and began again. The signature was not elegant. It slanted downward, and the final letters crowded each other near the margin. It was hers. Naomi made certified copies for the bank, county recorder, medical providers, and real estate company. Elena Wardell arranged for Agnes's direct access to her accounts to be restored. Passwords were changed. Statements would go to a secure address Vanessa could not monitor. A temporary protective order followed, limiting Vanessa's contact with Agnes while the animal cruelty and financial coercion inquiries continued. The legal changes happened without shouting. No paper was torn, no door slammed. Yet by the end of the afternoon, Vanessa no longer controlled the channels through which Agnes's life had been explained. Martin returned from Alaska the following day. He arrived at the Henslow house carrying the cold with him. At 55, he was tall and lean beneath a dark navy technical jacket, his graying hair cut close from years of wearing hard hats. A short salt and pepper beard covered his jaw. His hands were cracked from outdoor work, and he held his wool cap rather than wearing it, twisting it slowly as if it were the only object in the room he understood. Merrick met him briefly in the driveway. Martin looked toward Bracken, who stood beside Merrick but did not approach. "So you're Duval?" "Merrick." Martin's gaze moved over the faded veteran patch, the old olive coat, the dog leaning close to Merrick's leg. "My wife says you've turned everyone against her." Merrick said, "Your mother asked me to keep Bracken safe. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have for you." Martin looked tired rather than angry. The distinction did not make him easier to trust. Inside the house, Naomi had arranged the meeting around Agnes's dining table. The room looked almost unchanged. The same polished sideboard stood beneath the family photographs. The same cinnamon candle burned near the window. The same clock marked time in precise, harmless clicks. But Agnes sat at the head of the table. Vanessa sat opposite her. Annika Croft stood near the doorway. Elena remained beside Agnes, while Naomi arranged a small stack of documents within reach of her client. Merrick stayed near the porch door with Bracken. He had no legal role in the financial discussion and did not pretend otherwise. Martin took the chair beside Vanessa. For the first several minutes, he searched for a version of events that could preserve the family he thought he had. "Maybe this got out of control," he said. "Maybe Vanessa panicked after the rescue place refused the dog." Vanessa turned toward him. "Thank you." Martin continued, "And Mom, caring for someone is complicated. You have had difficult days." Agnes watched him. He pushed ahead. "The property is expensive to maintain. Selling might have been discussed because it made practical sense." "Discussed with whom?" Agnes asked. Martin hesitated. Vanessa answered for him. "With people who understand what the future requires." Agnes's face did not change. "That is not what I asked." The room went quiet. Martin looked down at his hands. Agnes did not raise her voice. She did not accuse Vanessa of becoming a monster overnight. Instead, she described how control had entered the house disguised as assistance. Vanessa took the keys because Agnes had once misplaced them in a garden basket. She redirected the phone because Agnes missed 2 calls while outside pruning branches. She began collecting prescriptions because winter roads were difficult. She brought medication earlier in the evening because Agnes had trouble sleeping. She canceled library visits because the weather was cold. She discouraged Ruthie from visiting because Agnes needed rest. Each step had arrived with a reason. Each reason had sounded almost kind. "I did help you," Vanessa said. "You cannot erase that." "I am not erasing it," Agnes replied. "I am telling you where help ended." Vanessa's mouth tightened. Agnes continued. "Help is carrying a bag because I ask. Control is deciding I no longer need to leave the house. You were forgetting things. Yes. You left the stove on. Once. You became emotional. I was living with someone who kept telling me my emotions proved I could not be trusted." Martin shifted in his chair. Agnes turned to him. "You sent money." "I did more than that." "You called." "I called whenever I could." "And when I tried to tell you something was wrong?" Martin opened his mouth. No answer came. Agnes did not rescue him from the silence. He remembered the recording from the pipeline station. His own voice, impatient and tired, telling his mother to listen to Vanessa. "I thought she knew what she was doing," he said. You thought choosing her explanation meant you did not have to choose anything. The sentence settled between them. Martin lowered his head. Vanessa pushed back from the table. This is unfair. I was here. I was thousands of miles away. You needed appointments, meals, bills paid. The business failed, yes, and we had debt, but selling this house would have solved more than one problem. It would have solved yours, Agnes said. It would have protected the family. It would have removed me from my own. Vanessa's control broke only slightly. Her silver pin appeared in her hand. She turned the cap once, then again. This house is too large for you. Agnes reached for the document Naomi had placed beside her. She slid one certified copy across the table. Vanessa looked down. The revocation of power of attorney bore Agnes's uneven signature at the bottom. Vanessa read the first page, then the second. Her face remained composed, but the pen stopped moving. Agnes spoke without triumph. As of this afternoon, you no longer speak for me. Vanessa looked toward Martin. He did not reach for her. Outside, a vehicle door closed. Two investigators were waiting to escort Vanessa to a formal interview concerning Bracken's sedation, the transport arrangement, and the property communications. She was not arrested in the dining room. No one announced justice. The law was not finished with its questions. Brent had begun cooperating in exchange for consideration. Colby continued denying responsibility until investigators recovered deleted messages and matched his prints to the damaged cage. Vanessa's exact knowledge of the plan at the lake remained under review, as did the financial records and misuse of medication. But she left the house without Agnes's keys, Agnes's accounts, or Agnes's voice. After the door closed, Martin remained at the table. "I'm sorry," he said. Agnes looked at him. He seemed to expect more. Perhaps forgiveness, perhaps anger, anything that would give him a role he understood. "Instead," she said, "you did not build the cage." Martin's eyes lifted. "But you kept choosing the explanation that made it easier not to see." He absorbed the words without defending himself. "I know." "No," Agnes said. "You are beginning to know." Martin nodded slowly. "What do I do?" "Listen until I finish." That was all she offered. It was also more than he had earned. Later, after Naomi and Elena had left, Merrick sat with Agnes on the back porch. Snow moved softly between the aspens, barely touching the rail before melting. Bracken lay between them. His silvered head rested on Merrick's boot, while one front paw remained across the hem of Agnes's skirt. The arrangement seemed deliberate. Agnes looked down at him. "He refuses to choose sides." "Poor tactical discipline," Merrick said, "or superior judgment." For a while they listened to the trees. Then Agnes asked, "Who did the watch belong to?" Merrick glanced at her. She had noticed the old pressure-resistant watch beneath his sleeve earlier that day. "Daniel Rowe." "Your friend?" "My dive partner." The words came slowly. Merrick told her about the final mission. A vessel had gone down in violent water. He brought the rest of the team out through a damaged compartment, but the structure shifted before he could return for Daniel. Steel collapsed. Water closed. Merrick survived. Daniel did not. "For years," Merrick said, "I thought surviving meant I owed him something." "You did." He turned toward her. Agnes continued. "Memory, honesty, a life that proves his mattered. That is not what I gave him." "What did you give him?" "Punishment." The word came out quietly. Merrick looked at the falling snow. "I decided happiness would be disrespectful." Agnes considered that. "If Daniel were here, do you think he would be grateful?" "No. I think he would be furious." Merrick almost smiled. Agnes leaned back in her chair. "Imagine giving your life for a man, only to have him spend 30 years using your sacrifice as an excuse to be miserable. Very ungrateful behavior." The laugh escaped Merrick before he could stop it. It was brief, rough from disuse, but real. Bracken raised his head and looked from one of them to the other. Then he released a long, suffering sigh and lowered his muzzle again. Agnes nodded toward him. "He agrees with me. He is asleep. He can multitask." The snow continued to fall. Inside the house, documents waited to be filed and questions waited to be answered. Nothing was fully repaired. Martin had not been forgiven. Vanessa had not been convicted. Agnes did not yet know where she would live, but her name was on her own decisions again. For that evening it was enough. By late February, winter had begun loosening its grip on Silverwake Lake. The snow still lay deep beneath the aspens, and ice covered much of the northern shoreline, but the days had grown longer. Water appeared in narrow black seams near the reeds. The sun no longer vanished before the town had finished lunch. Change had come slowly enough to be trusted. Agnes Henslow did not return to the house on the ridge. For several weeks, she stayed in a furnished apartment arranged through Adult Protective Services. It was plain and temporary, with cream walls, borrowed dishes, and a window facing the parking lot. Yet the first night she slept there, Agnes placed her own key on the bedside table and stared at it for several minutes. No one else carried a copy without her permission. That small piece of metal made the room feel more like hers than the large house had felt in months. Martin visited when invited. He brought groceries once and made the mistake of putting them away without asking. Agnes watched him move a jar of tea from one shelf to another. "Did the tea request relocation?" she asked. Martin stopped. "No." "Then perhaps consult it first." He returned the jar to its original place. The lesson was delivered lightly, but he understood it. Martin had accepted a transfer to an Oregon maintenance division. The position kept him closer to regular roads and gave him enough predictable time to be present without assuming control. He found a cottage for Agnes in an independent living community 10 minutes from his future home. Agnes reviewed the lease herself. She required a private telephone line, direct access to all accounts, written consent before staff entered, and transportation services she could schedule without Martin. When he read the list, Martin rubbed his beard. "This looks like a treaty." Treaties become necessary after disputed borders. "I said I was sorry." "And now you are learning geography." Martin almost smiled. He was becoming better at listening until the end. Not perfect, better. The Henslow house remained more difficult. Agnes did not want Martin to inherit it as if regret had earned him a prize. She also refused to return to rooms where every chair, medicine bottle, and closed door remembered a decision made without her. Naomi Kersey presented several options. Agnes chose North Idaho Elder Haven Network, a nonprofit that operated legal clinics and emergency housing for older adults escaping coercive family situations. The organization had existed for more than a decade and already managed 2 small residences in neighboring counties. The sale required appraisals, inspections, board approval, and enough paperwork to make Harlan declare that civilization had clearly been invented by people who hated trees. Nothing happened quickly. That mattered to Agnes. The house would not transform overnight into a perfect refuge with fresh paint and a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The front steps needed a ramp. The wiring required replacement. The upstairs bedrooms could not be used until a second fire exit was installed. By early spring, only the front sitting room had reopened as a consultation office. A modest sign stood beside the walkway. Elder Haven, legal, medical, and emergency support. The house was not healed. It had been given a different purpose. Agnes directed part of the sale proceeds into a small fund for the care of animals belonging to older adults who needed emergency shelter. It would cover temporary boarding, food, vaccinations, and transport. Naomi asked whether Agnes wanted the fund named after her. No. After Bracken? Agnes considered it. He would become impossible to live with. In the end, she called it the Open Gate Fund. No one should remain in danger because the only creature they trust cannot come with them, she said. Bracken, however, could not go with Agnes. Dr. Tobias Penn delivered the conclusion with his usual refusal to disguise difficult facts. "He has mild arthritis in both hips," Tobias said. "The move itself would be manageable, but another unfamiliar house, another long drive, and another complete change in routine may not be kind to him yet." They were gathered in Merrick's cabin. Agnes at the kitchen table, Tobias beside the stove, Merrick near the window, and Bracken stretched across the floor where he could keep all 3 people in view. Tobias continued. "The Oregon community will not approve a large dog until its new pet area is completed. That could take months." Agnes ran her fingers along Bracken's silvered muzzle. He had filled out since the rescue. His ribs no longer showed sharply, and the dark amber fur around his neck had regained its thickness. Yet he still startled when a chain struck metal. He still stopped several feet from the boat. Most evenings, he slept near Merrick's bedroom door. The truth was visible before anyone spoke it. Bracken had begun building a life at Silverwake Lake. Agnes looked toward Merrick. "Do you want him?" Merrick frowned. "That is not the right question." "It is the one I asked." "He is yours." "Yes." Bracken lifted his head at the change in Agnes's voice. She touched the pale patch at the center of his chest. "I love him enough not to make him begin again simply because I am beginning again." Merrick looked down at the dog. Wanting Bracken had never been the difficulty. Admitting it was. "I'll take care of him," he said. "That sounds like duty." "It usually does. I am not giving him to a sentry." Merrick met her eyes. "He has a home here." Agnes nodded. That was the answer she needed. Marisol Vega prepared the transfer forms. Agnes remained the legal owner until every document was signed, witnessed, and filed. Merrick's name was added to the microchip registry, county license, veterinary account, and emergency contact records. Agnes signed more slowly than Merrick, not because she doubted the decision, because some acts of love deserved to be felt while they were happening. She removed Bracken's old tag from his leather collar. The metal was scratched and dulled from years of use. In its place, she attached a new brass tag with Merrick's number on one side and her Oregon contact information on the other. Merrick examined it. 2 numbers. "One home," Agnes said. "One person who will always answer." Bracken shook his neck. The tag made a small sound. He flinched but did not retreat. Agnes smiled sadly. "He is not being abandoned." "No. He is living under one roof and belonging beneath 2. For several weeks, Bracken continued accompanying Merrick to the dock without stepping onto the boat. Merrick had returned to shoreline work after the county completed its review. The suspension notice was withdrawn without ceremony. No apology arrived. Merrick did not ask for one. He collected his equipment from the maintenance shed and resumed the quiet routine that had once been only his. Bracken watched from the dock. Harlan eventually declared the problem mechanical. "All emotional crises become mechanical if you own enough tools." "That explains nothing," Merrick said. "It explains my entire life." Harlan built a wide wooden step that connected the dock to the boat. He covered the joints with thick fabric and replaced the exposed metal clips with rope loops. The result was inelegant but quiet. He placed one boot on it and bounced. "Stable." "It is crooked." "So are you." They never pulled Bracken forward. They did not hide treats in the boat or lift him aboard. Each morning, Merrick stepped down, started the motor, and left while Bracken remained beside Harlan on the dock. Each afternoon, the dog waited for him to return. The distance became part of their routine rather than a failure. On the morning Agnes left Bellwether Pass, the sky was clear and intensely blue. Her suitcase rested in Martin's vehicle, and the road south had already been checked for ice. Agnes asked to stop at the lake first. Merrick prepared the boat as he always did. Harlan stood near the mooring post, arms folded over his work coat. Agnes waited a few yards back, one hand resting on her cane. Bracken followed Merrick to the dock. He stopped at the wooden step. The lake moved gently beneath the hull. Merrick stepped aboard and began checking the collection net. He did not turn around. Bracken stared at the water. His body remained still, but Agnes could see the tension along his shoulders. The same cold surface that held morning sunlight had once closed over his cage. No one spoke. Bracken lifted his right front paw. He placed it on the step. The boat shifted. His paw withdrew halfway, claws pressing into the wood. Merrick continued coiling rope. Bracken looked toward Agnes. She did not call him. Her face held pride and grief so closely together that neither could be separated from the other. Bracken set the paw down again, then the second. He moved slowly, stopping whenever the boat responded beneath his weight. At the final step, his hind legs trembled. Merrick lowered himself onto the rear bench, leaving the entire center of the boat open. Bracken climbed aboard. He stood rigid for a moment. The hull touched the dock with a soft knock. Bracken flinched so hard that his claws scraped the floorboards. But he did not jump out. He turned once, lowered himself at the bow, and faced the open lake. Harlan removed his hat. "Well," he said quietly, "management has arrived." Agnes covered her mouth with one gloved hand. Merrick looked toward her. She nodded. It was not permission. That had already been given. It was farewell. Bracken had not forgotten the cage. He had not defeated fear in one heroic moment. His body still remembered water, metal, and the loss of control. He had simply made a choice larger than the memory. Weeks later, Harlan painted a small black paw print on the side of Merrick's collection bin. The residents of Bellwether Pass began calling Merrick and Bracken the Lake Patrol. Merrick rejected the title, arguing that patrol officers received salaries. "Bracken is management," Harlan told anyone who listened. "Merrick handles manual labor." Bracken accepted the promotion without visible surprise. Merrick also delivered the tin box of medals to the local Veterans Center. He did not ask for them to be displayed in his cabin or placed beneath his photograph. He offered the medals alongside Daniel Rowe's name and told the center director that any account of the rescue should include the man who did not return. Then Merrick stayed for coffee. The following week, he attended a veterans gathering. He spoke little. That was not the point. He returned the week after. Pain had not left him. Daniel was not less dead. Merrick had simply stopped treating grief as a guard posted outside every good thing that tried to enter his life. On a bright morning near the end of winter, the aluminum boat moved slowly through the blue-silver water of Cedar Inlet. Bracken sat at the bow, his torn right ear angled toward the forest. His new tag caught the sunlight whenever he turned his head. Merrick worked the motor from the rear bench. "The salmon are late," he said. Bracken watched the reeds. Harlan tied the stern line incorrectly again. Bracken sneezed. Merrick narrowed his green-gray eyes. "You may hold that opinion until we return to shore." The dog looked back at him, silver muzzle bright against the dark water. Beyond the trees, the former Henslow house stood beneath scaffolding. One downstairs room was already open to people who needed someone to believe them before their lives could be reduced to paperwork. Far away in Oregon, Agnes arranged her own shelves, answered her own telephone, and decided when Martin was allowed to move the tea. On Silverwake Lake, an old veteran and a dog once thrown away traveled toward the morning light. Neither had been restored to the person he had been before loss. Agnes had not reclaimed the life that existed before control entered her home. Martin had not earned forgiveness simply by recognizing his failure. Bracken still trembled when metal struck metal. Merrick still woke some nights hearing water close over Daniel. Healing had not erased any of it. It had only returned to each of them the right to decide the next step. Sometimes freedom was not a wide-open gate. Sometimes it was one unsteady paw placed on a wooden board, while the people who loved you remained quiet enough to let the choice be yours. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not holding on, speaking louder, or choosing for someone else. It is making room for them to take the next step in their own time. Merrick, Agnes, and Bracken were not healed because the past disappeared. They began to heal when each of them was finally allowed to choose where they belonged. In our own lives, may we learn the difference between helping and controlling, between protecting and possessing, and between speaking for someone and truly listening. Share in the comments what this story meant to you, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage, loyalty, and quiet human kindness. May God give you the wisdom to listen, the courage to let go, and the peace to recognize the small doors He opens along the way.